Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the President's Podcast right here on our online newsroom On the Record. The views the news excludes. I'm your host, John Fortney, and as always, joined by Ohio Senate President Matt Huffman. And we have a very special episode today. We are also joined by Howie Beigelman, the CEO of Ohio Jewish Communities, and Rabbi Yitz Frank, who is a rabbi with Agudath Israel. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. This Ohio Senate made a very strong statement this week, passing Senate Resolution 214 in support of Israel and condemning the heinous attacks that happened last Saturday. And Mr. President, this is something that really needed to happen and be said, and it goes on to the United States Congress. And this resolution is also a message to the President of the United States.
This is sort of a reflection of the Senate's commitment to not just the state of Israel, but I think more directly the Ohio citizens who are Jewish citizens. And Ohio, like the United States, is a rich mix of cultures. And some have absolutely nothing to do with each other, but we're all Americans, and that's what's important. And the commitment and the contribution of the Jewish community to the success of the state of Ohio in a variety of ways, culturally, economically, educationally, is important. So I think most of our friends in the community know about the commitment, but to have an official act is important, I think.
Rabbi Frank, where were you in last Saturday, and how did you find out about the attack?
Saturday and Sunday were Jewish holidays, and as an Orthodox Jew, we don't drive, we don't answer the phone. You know this well at those times. And so we are starting to get reports from our security guards that are employed at our synagogue on Saturday, and we slowly got more and more information. I didn't really get a full upload until after the holiday ended Sunday night, and I had a lot of texts and phone calls, including from many elected officials expressing sympathy, and that's when we started to realize the scope of what had unfolded, and it's just shocking.
Howie?
Very similar. I went to synagogue, and also I don't use a phone or drive on a Sabbath or holiday, and I got to synagogue, and I was with one of my kids who's relatively young, and one of the security guards came over to me and said, did you know what happened in Israel? Let me tell you privately. And he pulled me aside and he told me what we knew at the time. And it was very sketchy. We were getting kind of sketchy reports. Some of it probably wasn't even accurate at all times. And I remember we stopped services in the middle, and the rabbi added several psalms. And then we went back to regular services. And then there was another update later on from the rabbi at one point. And again, after Sunday night, I got my phone and I got a fuller picture of what was going on. And very similar, many texts and emails, messages, phone calls from people, federal, state, local elected officials, pastors, church leaders, just general citizens, other lobbyists. I mean, the outpouring of concern and support was really very powerful to us, and the resolution is a part of that, but it was really just to see how much people care about Israel and about the Jewish community here and other supporters of Israel in Ohio was really very powerful.
Sure, people are worried sick here all over Ohio that have friends in Israel, friends and family. What are they telling you, and what are you hearing about that? What's the message?
So thankfully, we have family there. They all checked in safe. Actually, just got a text message right now from a relative in Israel. Their brother-in-law was called up to the reserves right away. Today was his son's circumcision. He was able to make it back actually and be there for the circumcision. So it's very powerful. Just kind of a life-affirming moment. There's a lot of those moments happening now. I got another video message from friends of mine who were both called up in the reserves. And I have a friend's son who's actually active duty, and he was called. He's at his battalion was actually on the Gaza border, and they were attacked on Saturday. He wasn't there that day; he was off for the holiday, but he got back right away. And I think his message was actually really very powerful, and it's what I've been hearing a lot from people in Israel, which is, so he's part of the Golani Brigade, which is and he said we've been in every one of Israel's wars. We fought in every war, this brigade. We refused in 1973 a retreat order on the Golan Heights. and we will fight in this war. And our motto is not unto death, because there's death in war. Our motto is unto victory, and we're going to fight, and we're going to be victorious as a people. And he said, we are united. There is not one division in Israel anymore. Everyone is showing up. They've called up 300,000 soldiers, 3% of the population. And then he said at the end, he said, I want to tell you one other thing. He said, you guys don't feel bad if you go to the movies or take your kids out to the park or go to dinner with your wife. You live your life, and you live it like you want to live it, and don't live in fear, because that's going to let them win. And you let us do our jobs. And that's what we've been hearing a lot of.
That's a great message. How about you, Rabbi?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I was actually talking to a board member of mine on the way down here, and his brother was in the army, and he was on vacation in Thailand until 2 days ago. He got on a plane and came back. There are dozens of people from I know the Cleveland community, I imagine Columbus, Cincinnati, all over the state, that were former Israeli soldiers, that they got the draft notice, they got on a plane and went back to Israel to fight, even though they probably could avoid it if they don't want to. But these are their friends or families. I mean, it's shocking images. You see Hamas came in, they killed men, women, children, shot babies in the head, the entire Israeli public, and really, I think anyone that has an ounce of morality within them around the world, I think feels the same way. And those that are able to go and fight, they are.
We had some folks suggest yesterday that some of their constituents said, well, why don't they just give them some land and this would all go away? And my response was, well, it's sort of like after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, we should say, well, why don't we give them the Hawaiian Islands, and that we won't have to go to war? And that's not how the mindset of folks like this who are thinking. And there was kind of an interesting breakdown on one of the news stations this morning about the different factions, that Hamas is not the same group that's in the West Bank, although they may have similar goals, but in different methods. Could either of you address who some of these groups are and how they may be different?
Yeah, I mean, I could take a stab. I mean, Howie probably knows some of this stuff better than I do, but I think it's important for the listeners to understand that what's going on right now, there's a lot of innocent Palestinians that live all over in the West Bank and Gaza and things like that. Gaza is governed, the actual government of Gaza is controlled by Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, right? So this is the equivalent of, let's say, MS-13 got elected to run the legislature in Ohio. That's what we're talking about. And so, they're terrorists. When essentially a government, it's really a government that came in and went and murdered innocent civilians in a neighboring state. I think there's a lot of history, along the lines of what you're talking about, I guess, different things that the Palestinian people want, and all those things could be addressed, but can't be addressed when there's a murderous terrorist organization that literally just wants to kill your innocent civilians. This can't happen.
There is no negotiating, in other words, Howie.
Yeah, I think, and again, Gaza was, the Israelis at one point were in Gaza after 1967. They pulled out a bunch of years ago, and Hamas took over, essentially. It's governed by Hamas. It's not, they have that land. And what Hamas is saying, what people are saying, what I'm seeing a lot of, people are saying, it's been over 70 years of occupation. This isn't about 1967. This isn't about the West Bank or Gaza. This is about Israel. This is about saying we don't want Israel. When they say from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, we don't want Jews here, that's what they mean. They don't want Israel there. And, you can negotiate with people. Israel's made peace with Egypt. Israel's made peace with Jordan. With Egypt, they gave back a lot of land. They gave back the entire Sinai Peninsula. They've offered to the Palestinians various points to give back land. They've made peace with United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with Sudan, without any obviously land exchange. There was conversation about Saudi Arabia coming in even very soon, and they're willing to make peace. They're willing to take risk for peace, and they're willing to make concessions for peace. But this is not that. This is again, it's been said so many times, but it's worth hearing it again. This was the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. And many of the things that Hamas was doing were reminiscent of the things that the Nazis did. beheadings, humiliation of bodies, all kinds of terror and torture. I just saw, when I went here, I saw a video of somebody whose daughter was an 8-year-old daughter was taken, and they told from one of the kibbutzes right over there when they invaded, and they told him 2 days later that they found her and she was dead, and his response was, yes, and he smiled, and he said, I'm smiling because there was only 2 choices. She was either dead or she was in Gaza, and if she was in Gaza, it's a fate worse than death. And it's torture, and it's who knows what would be. So I think there's just no negotiating here at this point. It's Israel has to defend itself.
But it's also important, like the scale of the attack, at least compared to the Israeli population, it's equivalent of about 9 9/11s. We went to war over 9/11. We pretty much destroyed 2 countries. This is 9 times that, and it's ongoing, right? Because they have hostages there, right? So like I think like what Howie was talking about, what we were talking about before, like the context of the history there. I mean, that there's a time to have that conversation, but it's almost irrelevant to the fact that the government of Gaza right now went in and murdered hundreds of men, women, and children. They can't tolerate that. They can't even negotiate with that. They can't even have a conversation with someone like that. It just needs to be, there's just no moral equivalency to anything.
So we're sitting here in Ohio, and you know, folks would like to do something, and you know, I saw this morning some commercials about contributing in one way or another financially, but what are the best ways to do that if you're sitting in Lima, Ohio, or Cleveland, or someplace else in Ohio?
So I mean, I think there are a lot of organizations that are raising money, and a lot of them are probably very valid. To me, I think one of the most important things, and it's really a teaching moment, is like now is the time to expect the elected officials that represent you to make a statement and show us where they stand. And I think the vast majority of them, we've been hard, and I mean, it's really starting all the way from the top. I mean, President Biden has been incredible on this. I think that's gotten very, very bipartisan, positive reviews. But even your local city council member, like they should say something about this. This is a terrible act, and now's the time to get people on the record to find out where they stand. I don't know if you follow social media at all. I know you do, John.
Once in a while.
Yeah. Some of the things that are happening in college campuses are appalling. And if you are a donor, if you are a citizen of a state, like you need to make your views known that some of this stuff is unacceptable. And it's really a very, not just a teachable moment. I think it's going to create a lot of changes going forward.
You know, Howie, don't be afraid to take a stand, whether it's a teenager, college campus, whatever it may be. Maybe just extend a hand and say, we're thinking about you. We're praying for you.
Yeah, prayers are very much needed, and reaching out is really appropriate. I mean, again, I had outreach this morning to the college campus point from some of the folks who oversee the state university system, and you know, Chancellor Gardner reached out, others, and you know, there's real interest in making sure that on the one hand, obviously, that free speech is protected, but also that people are physically protected, and people are and making sure of that on both ends. And you know, again, no one's saying that no one can have a political opinion, even as horrendous as we might find it. That's the First Amendment. But you know, on the other hand, they have to be able to do that in a safe way, and people should feel safe when they're on a college campus.
You know, one thing that I've always found somewhat disturbing, you can read things in history books. You can read all about Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, the military attack, the surprise attack, 9/11. But once a little time goes by, it seems to me there's a lot of young people that don't really have a feel for the threat that is always out there. And there is one thing that does really differentiate 9/11, as heinous as that was, and my generation can certainly remember exactly where we were. We did not see bands of terrorists going through the streets in Marietta, going into homes, going through the streets in Gahanna or Rocky River, and killing mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and babies. And sometimes it can be just out of sight, out of mind, Mr. President, when we live within the freedoms that we have here in this country.
Yeah, we use the phrase first world problems a lot, and we talk about whatever happens to be on the menu in the State House about, pick all the topics that we've dealt with this year about school funding or whatever it is. And sometimes I say, and I've used this metaphor before, well, it's very unlikely that the people in the next village over are going to come over, burn our village, kill the men, kidnap the women and children. That doesn't happen in the United States. It did at one point in certain places, maybe 160 or 70 years in the Ohio frontier. That was actually something that did happen on a very limited basis. So it's very easy to be complacent when you live in the 21st century in the United States. I mean, the rest of the world was mostly devastated after World War I, and for the last 75 years, we've been able to really be the leader economically, militarily. Our economy, despite some of the setbacks we've had, is still enormous compared to the rest of the world. So it's complacent is really the right word. So and television has helped. The reporting by all the news channels and has helped because you can actually see this. Now we don't see the real atrocities, but I was able to go to the Holocaust Museum in New York, and also we had Senator Yuko and I had a wreath-laying ceremony at the memorial in Jerusalem. And when you go through those, the excellent museum that we saw in Israel, you have to do it at least once in your life. Even if you live this great life in the state of Ohio, you have to see this is within the realm of some people that are living today can still do that. But it doesn't have to be, and that's what we have here in Ohio and in the United States.
Here at the State House, if you ever have a chance to go visit, especially this time of year in the fall, make sure you visit the Holocaust Memorial, which is on the lawn at the State House, and just take a moment to read some of the stories and inscriptions there. Final thoughts. What do you need from your Ohio neighbors as we move forward? What is it? What is the message that you really want Ohioans to know, to understand, to take to heart in this?
I think what Yitz was saying was that, take a stand, whoever you are. You could be a regular person, your grocer, your tailor. Obviously, the legislature has done some of that already, and take a stand. And this is good versus evil. This is terror versus democracy. This is not about politics, or this is not partisan. This is nothing. This is literally good versus evil. And if you would see a truck speeding down the road at a child walking in the middle of the street, what would you do? This is the moment to step up and do something, and take a stand, and also just again keep everybody safe, I think, and if that's part of your purview, and finally, look, Israel's going to get through this with everyone's help and with God's help. They're going to be back and plan to go visit, plan to do business there, connect more deeply, and they're planning for their future. Let's also plan for our partnership together in the future. Rabbi.
Very similar to what Howie said. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and one of the things, I think when Eisenhower finally defeated the Nazis and took over the concentration camps, he instructed his staff to go and take pictures of all the atrocities that they saw, because he said, and I think he used more salty language, but that in a few years people are going to deny this happened, so you need to document everything. In fact, that was true. It took years for the Allies to prosecute the war crimes of the Nazis, because the Nazis were very methodical and they were very careful to hide things, right? These terrorists live streamed this. You can go right now on social media. They live streamed themselves killing innocent civilians. And so, like Howie said, now's the time for people to go on the record. And I understand that there's all kinds of background. There's innocent Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank and in Israel, and Jews. But this is a time where people can answer one question: are you for murdering kids or are you not? And if the answer is that you are not, you should stand up and say so. And I think this is going to define people, especially Mr. President. You're obviously an elected official. Elected officials respond to constituents. Now's the time for those people, whether it's city council, dog catcher, or all the way up the food chain, to make where they stand known. And one of the things that you said about we can first world country and we don't necessarily see all this stuff. One of the reasons why this doesn't happen as often is because the United States has been a leader of democracy, has had a strong military, and has always had the courage to take a stand when they need to. And it's very important that continue now. And the stronger the United States is, the less of that will happen around the world.
Showing that we would not tolerate that here for one moment. Although it could happen here, you never know who's here after 9/11. But Ohio has been a strong ally, and the state legislature has been, the General Assembly has been a strong ally, Mr. President, of Israel.
Yeah, and obviously it will continue to be. It's a great relationship with both of these organizations. I was back in my house days a long time ago. I got to go to Chicago and received a national award from Agudath Israel for work on education choice. A.D. Matzen introduced me. He's a great man, and he stood up and said, "There are more Jews in this room than there are in the whole of Allen County." Now, I don't think that was true, and I'm not sure how A.D. knew that or suggested that, but his point was that there are many mutual missions, and including the one that I received the award for. It's all about communities and families, and in this case, safety, which is really the number one job of government, is protecting citizens. And certainly here, in the United States, but when we have really our strongest ally in the world, check those UN votes from time to time, and it's 175 to 1 or 2, and it's us and Israel on one side.
Ohio Senate President Matt Huffman, Howie Beigelman, the CEO of Ohio Jewish Communities, and Rabbi Yitz Frank from Agudath Israel. Thank you all for your time today. We're thinking of you and praying for you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the President's Podcast.
Sure.
I'm John Fortney, and we'll see you soon.